Welcome to another episode of BrainScratch. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I've spoken on the channel previously about how it just wrenches on my heart to hear about cases where young people lose their lives or have their lives taken. Just to think of all the missed experience, opportunity, loves, losses, the ride that this life is for many of us, and to think that in a blink, all of that is taken away from someone so young. It tears me up. Another thing that's sometimes difficult is learning about people through reading their obituary. But in today's case, we can't even do that because we have a young person that had their life taken from them and we don't know who they are. Today, we're looking into an unidentified case. This is a Jane Doe case, and she is known as Artesia Jane Doe. One of the best indicators that might help us lead to who she is this. This is what she was found wearing. It's been described several different ways. The official description from law enforcement seems to be a witch's robe. And if we roll down to the sleeves here, you can see there's kind of these long tassels that are hanging off the bottom. We've got some other information. We're going to put it all together, try to share it here, and I'm going to ask for your guys' help. Unidentified cases of this nature can be extremely tough. Do we have some hope on the horizon with this one? Of course we do, because there's amazing people out there doing amazing things. We're going to touch on that as well before the end of today's episode. But let's go ahead and get started by learning about where this is taking place. Graham County, Arizona. Graham County is a county located in the southeastern part of the U.S. state of Arizona. As of the 2010 census, the population was 37,220, making it the third least populous county in Arizona. So not a lot of people there. We're talking about the whole county only having 37,000 people. If we go down to the list of their individual cities and towns, Safford is the highest population. That's at less than 10,000. Now, today's case takes place actually outside of Safford, about 10 miles south of there in Artesia. And if we look at this rank of population, Artesia doesn't even show up. So for Artesia not to hit this list, we have to assume it's going to be less than 175 people that live in that area. And when you take a look at the satellite view with me, I think it's going to be easy to understand why. It's primarily, it looks like a lot of desert out there. Artesia is a populated place situated in Graham County, Arizona, United States. That's literally all I could get from Wikipedia on this. I could tell you the elevation, over 3,000 feet. That's it. Nothing in terms of how many people are there, any points of interest that are there. So let's go ahead and look at the unidentified person's profile over at NamUs. And it already grabs me to be so familiar with the NamUs interface. I'm used to seeing at least a person's face in that upper left-hand corner. And what do we have here? We have a picture of this robe. And in that picture, we've already got many questions. First of all, date that the body was found is October 26th, 2020. Is this a Halloween costume? Now, I'm struggling with that a little bit because the details of the discovery make it sound like the body might have been there for a period of time. If this is a Halloween costume, this had to have been for a party that was much closer to the start of October than the end of it. If this isn't a Halloween costume, what is it? Do we have a child that was maybe dressing goth, or a different type of costume party, some other type of event where they would have worn something like this? Other people are seeing this photo online and thinking, is this part of some ceremonial garb of some kind, some type of sacrifice or something along those lines? Let's continue with the details, and then we will get to some of the theories around this as well. Location found, Artesia, Arizona. Estimated age here as of NamUs says 13 to 17. Now, as we're going through the official information, we're going to see the age range gets pushed around quite a bit. And I have seen instances before where these profiles and the age ranges are not it's not the same as like a missing persons profile where you can say, yeah, we know that, Billy that went missing was 4 foot 10 inches tall, and you could really lean on that information. With these profiles, it's different. This is an estimated age range. So they're thinking it's 13 to 17. And they've got some good reason for skewing kind of young with that, which we're also going to discuss here. Thankfully, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children also helping on this case, contributing in a very big way, which we're going to get to. But you could see here in the case numbers, they've already got NCMEC's case associated to it. For demographics, this is a female, white, Caucasian, estimated age group, adult to pre-20. Once again, the age range, they're looking at 13 to 17. Estimated year of death here, they have it listed as 2020. For height, they're being very specific. And this is another thing that sometimes on these unidentified body profiles isn't this specific. Sometimes you're dealing with skeletal remains and they can't get the exact height. You'll see more of a range there. Here, they're being very specific, 5 foot 1 inch tall. Unidentified deceased. And in terms of the coordinates, we're going to look at a map, but they do have the coordinates here if you want to plop them into your own mapping system. Decomposed body found on ranch land. Inventory of the remains. They don't have anything listed. Condition of the remains, not recognizable. Decomposing. And we're going to see that in the physical description because there's just not a lot of detail. Hair color, sandy. Head hair description, 3 inches in length. Outside of that, we've got nothing. We don't even have eye color. Distinctive physical features, none noted. So I would think that they didn't note any particular tattoos, birthmarks, anything like that. For clothing and accessories, clothing, witch's gown on the body. Then we also get a hooded sweatshirt with skull design that is near the body. And you can see they've got a black and white photo of it here. We've got a color photo we're going to get to from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Honestly, in terms of unidentified cases, this profile, believe it or not, is a bit stronger than most of the ones that I look at. At least we've got solid on the hair color, on the haircut, on the height, and age range. They seem to be pretty confident about what they're hitting there. Now, in terms of exclusions, they have compared this case already to 3 other cases, including Alicia Navarro, another case that we've talked about here on the channel, and these have been ruled out. So I am seeing in some social circles people talking about other cases that they've submitted. Some of those cases are not on this exclusion list yet. They could be in testing. It could be that some of those cases don't have the materials to properly do a rule out like this. But seeing that they are processing exclusions on this at NamUs, I think it's a pretty fair assumption to say that DNA is available. How else are you going to make these exclusions? I guess perhaps based off the information. Like if they looked at Alicia Navarro's case and they were like, oh, Alicia is, Alicia's 5'7". And we know this person's only 5'1". Perhaps they could do an exclusion, but I don't believe that's how NamUs works. I think they're actually doing very specific tests for it to pop up on the exclusion list like this. So where is Artesia Jane Doe found? This is it. And you can see we are out in the middle. I mean, there is nothing. We've got a highway that is off to the west here. We've got the town of Artesia that is just a little bit north. But there is nothing out here. This is all just land. Got a little bit of a green patch here. I'm wondering, is this... Looks like it's a water reservoir of some kind, but even outside of that, no one's developed anything around it. It's very interesting that Artesia Jane Doe is found next to one of the only things that is actually any kind of development out here. This is a corral for livestock. But look at all this open space, and that kind of raises a question in itself. If you're going to hide a body in this area, look at all this potential open space. Why are you putting the body at one of the only structures that's out here in this area, regardless of it, if it's not used anymore? It's kind of an interesting question, especially when you've got that water reservoir over here. But even outside of that, there's tons of brush. Like, you know, if they would have stopped the car, walked off into the brush, or driven off a little bit into the brush, for example, if her body was in a clustered area like this, even knowing that she was wearing something as dark as what's being described as a witch's robe, I don't think the possibility of that being picked up by like a helicopter flying over or something would be very high. Instead, you get this kind of area where there's a landmark. There's basically something that people could see and gravitate towards. And that's kind of what happens that leads to the discovery. So a lot of people are wondering, was it expected? Did someone actually leave her at this location thinking she would be discovered at some point? Is this a message of some kind? So this is a color version of the robe photo. And you can see it looks like it's pretty much straight black. There does seem to be some type of detailing. It looks almost like a kind of crushed velvet look on this robe. And it's kind of hard to tell, but I don't know if this is like Halloween costume material. You know, typically those materials are fairly light, kind of fairly cheap. And I'm trying to look at these kind of the tassels that are hanging off the sleeves. It looks like in some of them, like I could almost see through it, but I don't know. And I don't know what they're doing to this photograph digitally before they release it. So I don't know. Is this something of higher quality, something that someone might wear, you know, on a regular basis if they were into goth culture or into some other culture like that would wear something like this? Or is this a straight up Halloween costume? And I've been looking every which way trying to figure it out. The thing that's bothering me is I know I've seen this design before, specifically with these single tassels hanging off, and I just can't find it. I'm trying to recall, and some people are talking about, oh, this almost looks like one of those Scream costumes. It's possible, but for some reason, like, this is really identifiable to me, and I've looked every which way I can trying to figure it out, and I can't. I imagine if you were going to do like a super low end Scream costume, maybe they would do that, because the traditional Scream costumes kind of have fabric that's hanging on like the forearm that drips down and then has a bunch of jags in it. Another thing that people are talking about is, are these straps something that was added by the person that owned it to kind of give it that look? But I'm fairly confident I've seen something like this in the past, but I look at a lot of different Halloween stuff, and, you know, through the years of being in theater and stuff like that, I've looked at all kinds of different costumes. It's really bothering me because I can't quite place it. But we did mention she was in the robe, but there was a sweater that was found near her, and here is that sweater. Pretty distinguishable. I went looking for this as well, found a pretty close match to it, but thanks to web sleuths, was actually able to firm that up with what I think is the direct match for it. We'll get to that information. But let's start getting into some of the local news and details about this. Over at the Gila Herald from October 2020, body found by hunter. A body found by a hunter off Artesia Road near the corrals on Monday was found in a tarp that was partially submerged in a 4-foot by 2-foot float box used to water livestock, according to Graham County Sheriff P.J. Allred. The sheriff's office has officially listed the investigation as a homicide and serves as the lead investigator with Safford and Thatcher Police Departments assisting, according to Allred. Sheriff Allred said, while nobody fitting the description of the dead body has been listed as being missing locally in the past month, they are searching to see if anyone else has been reported missing from out of the area that could be the deceased. We will figure it out, Allred said. We'll keep plugging away at it until we resolve it. Somebody wrapped it up in some stuff and put it where they put it. Now, it's unfortunate. We've gone through the NamUs profile, and of course we're rewinding time a little bit here because we're going back to one of the original articles. I don't believe that Allred knew that this was a little girl at the time of that quote. And a lot of people are kind of taking issue with, like, what's he saying? Somebody wrapped it up in some stuff and put it where they put it. I believe that might be from the first day or two that he's giving that information. And then, of course, it takes them a few days of process for them to get to the point of determining the sex. But what is a 4 foot by 2 foot float box? I went looking every which way for this as well, thanks to a commenter over on Reddit. A float is the same thing as the float in your toilet tank. It regulates the water level in a tank. The box is something that protects the float. The box protects it from things like weather extremes and just general damage, things like cows trying to chew on it. If you have a large watering trough, you can have a large float box. This page has an image of a trough with a large float box, and then he linked over to wwtank.com here. And it's interesting because when I was looking at the satellite view originally, I'm not familiar with this type of equipment. I was like, what are these big circular things that are here? And it looks like those are the types of troughs that he's talking about here. So the float tank, in some of these examples, the float tank's actually in it. Like you can see this little tank that's in here, down here. I believe this is actually where the float is inside of that tank in there. So I'm still just a little unclear as to the actual location. There seems to be a box that's close to this one up here. I don't know if that's the location where she was found. There might be another one that's over here. But you can also see the shadow of a windmill. And apparently a windmill is used for pumping the water to go ahead and fill those tanks when that's needed. And we could see here, even in this picture of this tank that's been fully installed, they've got a windmill that's nearby as well. So interesting to know it's got a lid. And that's kind of messing me up a little bit in terms of the description of how she's found. You're going to see why as we continue here. But let's go to silverbelt.com. Graham County Sheriff's Office seeks help. And here's a picture of the sweater. The Graham County Sheriff's Office is seeking the public's help in identifying the body of a teenage girl found 10 miles south of Safford on October 26, 2020. Based on an autopsy, the victim is believed to be between 13 to 15 years old. Now, we've got some other reporting on this that I think is just within a matter of days, maybe a month or two. Yeah, it looks like it was updated a few months later. A medical examiner determines body was that of a girl or woman. A forensic pathologist in Tucson has determined that the remains found south of Safford Monday are those of a girl or woman between the ages of 14 and 22. So it's like every source we hit on this case, we're getting a different age range. At NamUs, we've got 13 to 17. On the last article, we got 13 to 15. On this article, released only a few months later, we're now looking at 14 and 22. Detectives have their suspicions as to how she died, but they aren't releasing them at this time. They definitely know she was the victim of a homicide, said Undersheriff Jeff McCormies. How long she's been dead still isn't known. Pretty interesting there, because it doesn't seem like they're 100% sure of how she died. If they're saying detectives have their suspicions, we know that the forensic pathologist has already looked at her. We know that there's a full report that's been written up trying to figure out the cause of death. Now we're hearing that the detectives have suspicions as to how she died. So it would lead me to believe the level of decomposition is probably more than I was originally thinking, and they're not 100% sure. Maybe there's some type of marking in the clothing that's like, what if you saw something that looked like a bullet hole that was in a piece of the clothing or something like that. But they are being very clear that they say they definitely know she was the victim of a homicide. It's also just raising the question for me, is this the location of the homicide, or is this just the location where the body was left? I don't know, because we have no information in terms of how they processed that area. Local press on this really seems to just be repeating information that's coming to them from law enforcement, largely through the press releases. So I don't know if they treated that, did they process that whole area forensically as a crime scene, or was it just a matter of really processing this poor little girl and the items found with her? She was found submerged in a 4 foot by 2 foot float box. Allred said a quail hunter called the sheriff's office to say he'd found a bag near Artesia Road and suspected a dead child was inside of it because there were toys next to it. Now, we don't get any description on the toys, and in the conversation threads I've seen on this case, people are batting back and forth like, what kind of toys could this be? I mean, if we're talking a 13 to 15-year-old, what's she going to be carrying that would be toys? Is it something related to a costume? That kind of brings up another interesting fact in terms of thinking, is this a Halloween costume or not? Is there anything to support this being a costume? Yes, it's a robe. It looks like a witch's robe or a scream robe or a Grim Reaper robe, possibly. But is there a witch's hat? Is there, some type of prop that came along with that? I'm just wondering about that because of this comment of that there was toys found next to her. Another unfortunate phrasing there of saying it. Although he's referring to the bag. I don't know. McCormick said he has since learned the body was actually in a tarp. There was nothing on or with the body to help authorities identify her, Allred said. It's really terrible. Over at KOLD.com, we get an artist's rendering thanks to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. This is what the girl may have looked like. Investigators in Graham County are working to identify the remains of a young girl found in a remote area of southern Arizona late last year. The Jane Doe is described as white, between 13 to 17 years old, with short, light brown hair. Officials believe she was 5'1". She was found with a black robe or gown and a black hoodie with skulls on it, the release stated. Now, what about that hoodie? Of course, web sleuths at the official websleuths.com thread went into this, went after it. It's one of the first things I started looking at as well. The hit I came across was this for a Hot Topic skull Fair Isle Sherpa open cardigan hood, which, if you look at it, design is very, very similar. However, just a hair different. And where it's different is if you look at these wavy lines that are kind of happening between the skulls, they're kind of thin and they're just repeating the same thin line over and over. On the actual one, there's a heavier line, then a thin line, then the heavier line comes back. It's a minute difference, but it is different. Several people on different forums and threads in different places made the same discovery. Some of them even bought this themselves. They said, hey, I bought that, but it was at Walmart. And here is the listing for the No Boundaries Juniors printed Sherpa hood cardigan at Walmart. Looks like it's now $14.99, but you can see that pattern I was talking about with the thick line and then the thin line and then the thick line. This one seems to be a perfect match. Even the little triangles above the thick line, everything is a solid match on this. So it is a juniors. Once again, just reaffirming that information. This does seem to be a young girl. Let's continue over at eacourier.com. The Graham County Sheriff's Office has released sketches of a young murder victim whose body was found last October in the hope someone will come forward and identify her. And keep in mind, this is, as of when this article came out, this is May 24th, 2021. So there's been months of time that has passed. I'm sure investigators have been looking at open missing persons cases. I know just the internet was looking at missing persons cases and trying to line them up with this one. List after list after list, people submitting them directly to law enforcement, people submitting them to NamUs. It seems like that mechanism isn't working in this case. And it kind of opens us up to some other questions about what might be going on here that we'll get to. Originally, authorities suspected the remains belonged to a girl or woman between 14 and 22, but are now saying she was likely 13 to 15 years old, which is interesting because that's still tighter than what's currently listed at NamUs. The FBI has also used the victim's hair and blood to create a DNA profile. Experts will be analyzing the trace evidence found on the woman's clothing and on the toys found near her body, said Under Sheriff Jeff McCormick. So first of all, light at the end of the tunnel. DNA profile does it. We do have DNA in this case. So now it's just a matter of finding that right matchup or getting this in the hands of a good forensic genealogist that can do something with it. Interesting that they're talking about other trace evidence. And if we look at one of those early photos in terms of the robe, this one's been cleaned up, so you really can't see anything outside of the robe. But for example, here at NamUs, there's material that's all around this robe that it looks like hair, it looks like fibers, it looks like, just based on this picture, there's a lot to process just from this photo. That might be a clump of hair actually hanging off of one of these tassels here as well. And I'm trying not to look into this too much, but along those lines of thought of, I wonder if there's a wound, if they think that there's a wound that was made to her, and that's why they're making the strong assumption about homicide. I can't get my eyes off this section right in the middle of the picture, where it looks to me like there's possibly a tear. It could possibly be a tear there. It's so hard to tell because of how this fabric is. I'm also wondering, is there kind of I don't know if that's a pattern or... Yeah, I don't know. The black and white photo seems to be higher quality than the color one. But this, I don't know, this really just, I'm wondering if that's a hole. And I believe this is the back that we're looking at, the back of the robe. From this distance, it really looks like it, but I don't know, because you've got this kind of, like I mentioned, crushed velvet look. Over at unidentified.wikia.org, I just wanted to point out something that we touched on really briefly with the NamUs profile. A specific post-mortem interval is not listed. Basically, we don't know how long she was out there deceased. Yet, it is believed she died in 2020. And with the information, we know that the FBI was able to use materials, including blood, to create the DNA profile. It sounds like it's probably more a matter of weeks that she was out there rather than months. And I'm still just stuck on this aspect of the location. Why that particular location? Why is it near something? I mean, with that windmill there, you could find your way back there fairly easily. Is that part of, like, is the person close to her and they wanted to put her in a place where they could go back out there later? And in terms of that, even thinking of the toys, is this almost some type of informal burial or something along those lines? There's another quote I want to show you guys from one of the earlier articles on this, back over at EA Courier. This is, once again, Allred speaking here. Somebody had to remove the cover, put her in it, and cover it back up. He's talking about the float box, that someone literally removed the cover. We know that it has a lid because it keeps the float able to move up and down without being interfered by outside things. But if she was fully in the box, why would the quail hunter have thought that there was a dead child in this bag? It's the details around this are tough to understand. I don't know if, was there a bag near the float box that had the sweater in it, and that's what the hunter was assuming? Oh my goodness, that could be a dead child in there because there's toys scattered around this bag. And then in finding that stuff, they looked in the float box and then found her. But if she's 5'1", going in, I guess a 4 foot by 2 foot float box would still be possible. I don't know, but think about all these elements now. We've got, seems like personal belongings of the victim being left there, her being put into something that it sounds like could resemble a coffin almost. I can't shake this from my mind that this is some sort of informal burial. Or outside of that, is this an area that the person was familiar with? Is there some reason why the person gravitated back towards this place? I've seen some people online talk about, like, is this someone that worked there at the time? I don't think the ranch is active currently. We've also got the consideration that if she was placed inside of the float box like that, you're almost preserving evidence in that way. Like, you'd be protecting her from the elements as well. And just looking at what type of area that is out there, it boggles my mind. Like, why would you put her in that particular place? And with items like that could be used for identification. I mean, if they handled those items, there could be touch DNA that's on those toys that, the FBI is going to be able to find. There's a lot of things about this that, it's interesting because I feel like it's actually telling us more about the personality of the person that did this to her. And I'm sure they've got, profilers looking at this, thinking along those lines as well. But let's go to a comment here at Reddit. Let's start opening ourselves up to the considerations that are being discussed out there about this case. This is Traveling Cats. First of all, the hair. It's described as around 3 inches in length. I think it's a grown out buzz cut rather than a deliberate pixie cut. There was a trend where quite a few young people shaved their heads during COVID lockdowns. My friend's 17-year-old younger sister shaved her head when she realized her prom would be canceled. I've watched countless other teens do the same thing on TikTok over the past few months. Some did it to donate the hair or to raise money for cancer research. Another possible indicator of the age that we're looking at here, and we're comparing that to a trend that's going on with young people in that particular time frame of 2020. But someone else over here at Gila Valley Central has a different opinion. Shannon Parks says, I'm more inclined to believe this is possibly a young woman, perhaps a young mother. If that is the case, is there a small child missing? Was she on her way to visit a child and never arrived? Was there a domestic situation? There's some interesting thought in that, and I wish we had a better description of what these toys were, because that could certainly be a possibility in this, particularly if the toys were like, toys for a toddler or a baby, like really young toys. Could be a possibility as well. And like I mentioned, when it comes to these estimated age ranges on these unidentified persons cases, it can be tough sometimes. Knowing, once again, that fact with the FBI and the materials they were able to use to generate a DNA profile, I have a feeling that the decomposition wasn't, like, we're not talking skeletonized remains. So we might be able to lean on that age range a little bit more than we do in some of these unidentified cases. Over at thoughtcatalog.com, one question is that because the girl's body was found in such a rural place, it's strange that the body was in a float tank and not hidden in the brush where it is unlikely it would ever be found. It's really, really strange. Like, you've got nothing but open land out there, opportunity to go tearing off in any direction, and really making it next to impossible for her to be found. And I think it's just calling back to that. It's got to be that someone is familiar with that particular ranch for some reason, and it doesn't just have to be someone that works there. I mean, we've heard there's hunters that are going out to this area looking for quail, right? So they probably recognize that as a landmark of, oh, hey, I've gone hunting out in that area before. Well, where do you park? Oh, we park by the windmill. So it could be more casual than, we should be looking at former employees of the ranch or people that own the ranch or something like that. Because if you're out there, I imagine from the ground level, which unfortunately Google doesn't have like road level where I could drop down and take a look around, I'm pretty sure that you're going to see that windmill poking up along the skyline there. From what I understand, it's not mountainous, but it is a bit hilly there. But continuing at Thought Catalog, the biggest mystery is why this girl was wearing the witch's robes. Did the killer dress her up in this outfit? It's an interesting thought that actually had not occurred to me, but kind of along those lines, if you're thinking this is some type of ritual or something like that has gone down. And actually they continue to that. Was it part of a satanic ritual killing? Was it a Halloween costume? Unless the description from the toys came back as, like, I saw one person talking about, what if it was a mask? Like, what if it was, like a witch's mask that was there on the ground, and it was just described by the person as, oh, I saw toys, because they associated with something that a young person would have. I don't know. And interestingly, I went looking at all kinds of different costumes, but I went looking at witches' costumes. They're not typically just black robes. Like, typically they're black dresses that have capes or robes attached to them, but there's kind of more specific shape that's given to witches' costumes. That's why I'm seeing a lot of people that are leaning more towards like, oh, it's like the Grim Reaper or like the Scream costume or something like that. I think they're actually making a good point. I don't think this is necessarily a witch's costume, at least based off the witches' costumes that I've been looking at while looking into this. It was a few days before Halloween when the girl's body was found, but by all accounts, she could have been there a while. And I do think we're talking weeks. I don't think this is, one of the theories is people are saying, oh, were they at some type of Halloween party? There's a drug overdose. Everyone freaks out. They go and drop her somewhere. The time frame of this just doesn't seem right. Interestingly, if you think about someone else dressing them up like that, could that have been someone's intent? Could they have thought, we've got this body that we have to hide somewhere, and let's make up a story for the investigators here. Put a Halloween costume on her. They won't find her until after Halloween, and then they'll think, oh, it's, this was some kids that were out here partying and something bad happened or something like that. It feels a little bit like a stretch. Just the time frame just doesn't feel right for me. If she was found in the middle of November in the same condition, I think talking about a Halloween party or the possibilities of it actually being a Halloween costume would be much higher. And as for the sweater, that really doesn't help because, there's a lot of people that wear that sweater year round. What happened to Artesia Doe, and why has no one come forward to even identify her as a missing child? Probably the biggest question. Opens up a few possibilities. If this is a case where this is something happening within the home, that family might not be coming forward to file that missing persons report. Another factor that could be in this might be someone that is not documented in the U.S. And being so close to the border, I would hope that investigators have already reached out to Mexico with this profile and said, I don't know that Mexico has like a NamUs type database, but even just checking like the towns from the local area close to the border for missing persons cases, that might be a match. I would like to think that that's going on, but obviously there's not a ton of reporting on this case that's happening about the investigative steps in particular. And that is it for the official information that I can find on this case. What we wind up with is a handful of photos, these digital composites, a photo of a sweater, and a photo of a robe. But is there other hope in this case? I think so. With that DNA profile out there, I think it's a matter of time before a great organization, possibly DNADoeProject.org, gets their hands on this case and helps push this forward. You might have heard me talk about Colleen Fitzpatrick on the channel previously. She's a co-founder of DNA Doe Project. Let's learn a little bit more about them. The DNA Doe Project was founded in 2017 as a 501c3 nonprofit corporation with a simple humanitarian mission: to identify John and Jane Does using genetic genealogy. On March 5th, 2018, we solved our first case, Robert Ivan Nichols. On April 11th, 2018, our identification of Buckskin Girl as Marsha L. King was announced. The first time in history that the world learned of the power of genetic genealogy to solve cold case identifications. DNA Doe Project is an all-volunteer organization with over 60 experienced genetic genealogists giving their time and passion to our cause. In addition, we raise funds to cover the expensive lab costs involved in extracting and sequencing DNA from remains whenever an agency is unable to afford them. For this, we are deeply appreciative of our generous donors who have supported our organization and helped bring about our more than 24 success stories. So I did look for Arizona. They don't have this case listed yet. I feel like it is probably a matter of time. As a matter of fact, I've been in contact with Colleen a few times in the past. I might send her this video just to see if we can get this case into the consideration. Also, I saw some contact information for Allred, who's been working on this case. I don't know if he's even aware of an organization like this, the DNA Doe Project that's out there. I know everyone is pretty much aware of genetic genealogy at this point, but I don't know if all law enforcement divisions across the nation are aware of these types of caring organizations that have volunteers that are looking to help them crack these cases, which I think is probably this case's best bet for a surefire answer. I'm really thankful that there are organizations like this, volunteers giving their time to help cases of this nature. As a matter of fact, on behalf of myself and my supporters through Patreon, PayPal, thank you guys so much. We're making a donation to the DNADoe Project today in honor of this case. And I'm going to see if there's someplace I could put a little note about Artesia Jane Doe and see if I can help raise some awareness to her case with them. Who knows? And if there's some fundraising that they need to do to help on that case, we're here. We're absolutely willing to do that. I don't think they need funds for the DNA. It looks like the FBI already has that. It might just be a matter of getting that information in the hands of one of these caring volunteers and turning them loose. Of course, there's also the possibility that the information isn't in the public DNA databases to help solve that. So we need to still help. We need to share this message. We need to get these photos seen by more people. Maybe someone will recognize the robe. Maybe someone will recognize the sweater. Maybe someone will recognize the composite. You never know. There is contact information in the description box down below for anyone that thinks that they have information on this case, including a way to call it in anonymously if you need to do so. A big thank you to my supporters for allowing me to do donations like we did here today. I want to thank new patron Charles Napier. Thank you so much for joining on Patreon. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com, where you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even buy us a coffee like Sandra Ahlberg from Sweden recently did. We really appreciate your help as we look to help in these very, very difficult cases just like today's. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. Take care. We'll see you back here on Monday with a brand new episode of Case Cracked on the Lord and Arts channel.